That's what I was worried about.
We overlap a little bit, Michelle.
We can always postpone his till, so that they're all together too. And then we have from the fire marshal.
Can I be asking you to read the reelection and asking you to take the place?
We only have one, we might have some participating on the meeting. So,
All right. I'm calling the Wednesday, March 30th, 2022 Code Review Task Force meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. Roll call of members. Andrew Nusma, present. Sarah Albrecht, absent. Eric Cameron, absent. Tim Hull, present. Donna Jensen,
Present.
Godin. Nancy Nicetoon,
Present.
Michael O'Brien, absent. Steve Roush,
Present.
Joshua Walls,
Present.
Shelley Ward.
present.
Meetings of the public, members of the public, may attend in person or participate online at zoom.us/join, meeting ID 973-6654-2537. Once you log into the meeting, please use the chat feature to tell the moderator if you wish to speak to an item. More information is available in the agenda packet and on the city's website. Now on to the agenda. Item 1, adoption of the agenda. The first meeting item tonight is the adoption of the agenda. City Clerk, does staff have any changes to the agenda?
I do not, Chair.
Do any task force members have changes? May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt agenda.
And a second.
Second.
Moved by Donna, seconded by Tim to adopt the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay and raise your hand. The motion carries. Approval of minutes, item 2. Do staff have any changes to the meeting minutes?
Nothing from staff, Chair.
Any task force members have changes? May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve minutes.
And a second?
Second.
All right. Motion was sponsored by Donna, seconded by Tim to approve the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Those opposed, say nay and raise your hand. The motion carries. Item 3, reviewing outstanding items. City staff, are there any updates or outstanding items?
I did want to let the task force know that the council has also now approved the Title II changes. And we also, as we're working through Title III, the city attorneys have made the comment to change the appeal time from 10 to 14 days. I don't, if you remember that from last month. So we went back to Title I and also changed it in the appeal process from 10 to 14 days and had that both approved by the council so that they were consistent.
Thank you. Item 4, questions and comments from the task force. Item 4 of the agenda is questions and comments from the task force. Submitted comments are included in tonight's packet. Do city attorneys or staff have anything to add? No? Do any task force members have further comments? Okay. Item 5, final review and approval of Title III, Chapter 1, Alcoholic Beverages. Item 5 is the final review and approval of Title III, Chapter 1, Alcoholic Beverages. The final version of this title was included in the meeting packet. Do city attorneys or staff have any comments?
Nothing from staff.
Do any task force members have further comments? May I have a motion to approve the final version of Title III, Chapter 1?
I do have a comment.
Yes, please.
Some of the task force members here were not in favor of some of the changes that were recommended. So at this time, you would probably want to vote against this because you were not in favor of some of the changes that, or you were not in favor of leaving some of the items in that were left in. If that's the case, feel free to vote against this.
And to clarify the significance of that, when we unanimously approve something, many times that's put on the consent agenda for council. And if a council member doesn't take it off the consent agenda, put it on the regular agenda, then I think it just goes into effect. Is that correct?
Then it's adopted in a group with other items on the consent agenda and not discussed at all.
Okay, and if something comes out of here not unanimous, then it won't be placed on the consent agenda, and council will take it up for maybe further debate or discussion.
Correct.
Mr. Chair, citizens can also pull it from our consent agenda.
Oh, okay,
So,
thank you very much. May I have a motion to approve the final version of Title III, Chapter 1?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay, moved by Ward. Can I have a second?
I second.
Seconded by Godin. Is there any final discussion on it? I would like to say that this title, Chapter 1, represents a lot of really good changes. I will not vote in favor of it, because of the inclusion of the 3/4 mile rule and the freestanding building clause. I know we had a lot of discussion about that, so I won't go into depths about that. So specifically, the title still states that you have to have 3/4 of a mile between any establishment unless it's in the 42 corridor, and you also have to have a freestanding building. The reason why I disagree with that is I believe that is a protectionist position and an over-regulation. So it's next to impossible for someone to open that type of establishment in the city, because there's only about one spot left on the map where that could happen. I do believe that the free market should regulate here, not the city of Burnsville. I think that we would be best served as consumers if there was the possibility of free and open competition. I think that it is unlikely that we will see the moral decay of Burnsville as countless alcoholic beverage institutions come to sell and flood the market. I think that it's very unlikely that large number of institutions will try to establish in Burnsville, given the market is, I would say, pretty saturated as it is, and the cost of starting any business is high. But I believe that if they want the opportunity to succeed, they should be given that opportunity. It's not a guarantee. No one has a guarantee of success. I think that being a small business person or an entrepreneur is difficult. It's challenging. Government can make that harder. In this case, Burnsville's made it impossible for people who want to get into it. But we have protected the rights of those established. So that's why I will vote against it. If any member would like to comment or have a turn, we can hear that.
I have the same sentiments that I don't think there's a big need for those two requirements, freestanding and 3/4 mile. Because it's not, anyway, it's not, in some area, it's not, that doesn't matter. There's 2 exclusions or so, something like that, already.
Any other members wish to speak? Okay. So again, it was moved by Ward and seconded by Godin. So to approve Title III, Chapter 1 as presented tonight, all those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay and raise your hand. Nay.
Can you hold your hands up for just a minute, make sure I get everybody?
Member Walls, are you voting nay? On the, okay. So 4 opposed. How many people do we have voting altogether? Is that a tie vote?
Looks like it.
Yeah.
The motion fails to carry. Well, what would we like to do next then?
Mr. Jamnick?
He might not have heard you.
Joel, can you hear us?
I can.
the motion did not pass.
The matter is still before the task force then for another motion, either to review it further, make modifications, lay it on the table until additional members. But it's jurisdictionally still on the agenda right now, unless there's a desire to table it.
Okay.
Can I present this to the council with a split vote?
Yeah, the task force could vote to recommend it for council review without a recommendation and just forward it. But, the motion was to review and approve the draft as presented. That failed, so now another motion would be in order to either send it up with no recommendation or just forward it to the council, or to take additional action here. The only advice I would have is if you're going to revisit it substantively, we did not notify the licensees and others that participated previously, and so I would be concerned about taking any action tonight to actually revisit substantive matters without having it placed on the agenda at the next task force meeting. Invite interested persons to be in attendance when that vote is taken.
Well, I know that I'm obviously opposed to the motion, but we could potentially work it out. Maybe one of us would be convinced either way, but I also don't want to consume the entire evening discussing this. I think that certainly because we have not approved this item, certainly the council will debate it. And it is my opinion, based off of my understanding of just kind of how the council operates, that this item in particular is very likely to be discussed, even if we came unanimous. So I think that I would generally be in favor with just referring this right to the council for their discussion, because ultimately they will go through it again anyways. And I think that just referring it to them as is probably is a strong indicator of the wide range of perspectives and differences of opinion on this matter. What do people think?
I would agree with that. The only thing I would add on to that is that if you really are passionate on one way or the other, then I think at that point in time now, we've kind of discussed it, we hashed it out here quite a bit. I would say at that point now, you show up as a citizen and make comments to the city council, and then we move to the next stage. I think we've done our job with it. I think what we've established is that we have a wide range of opinions. We're not gonna come to a consensus. Let's move on to the next subject. I think that'd be a great idea.
Steve?
So can we submit it with the areas of disagreement?
Yes.
Because there was a number of improvements where we agreed.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
I will make sure that the council background reflects the areas that the task force was in disagreement.
And
Which
were there
were?
any items aside from the distance in the freestanding building that, yes, Joshua?
So mine were coming from what I haven't not had time to research on, but was really for the possibility of marijuana,
Okay.
and those kinds of things being able to be brought in, just, it's another opportunity. I am very cautious on making a call that's gonna jeopardize somebody being able to start their own business, and so that's truly, I'm on the fence, so that's where I'm leaning. But if we have an opportunity to continue to voice kind of our reservations, that would be it sounds like we have that opportunity then? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Which, maybe you don't know off the top of your head, but what council meeting should we attend if we were interested in discussing this matter?
We can schedule this for the second council meeting, which would be the 19th, correct?
April?
April 19th.
Okay. If you could include that in an email,
Yep.
just for everyone that was here, that would be great. I'll make a motion that we refer Title III, Chapter 1, as is for consideration by the council, noting that there was disagreement on the final resolution. Can I get a second on that?
Do we want to state where there was disagreement? What points?
That can be reflected in the minutes, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Michelle? The League of Minnesota Cities Conference in Duluth starts the morning of the 20th, and I'm sure several are planning on going up on that Tuesday night, so they can be at those 8 a.m. meetings in Duluth.
I did not realize that. That's right, that did just come out, didn't it?
Yep.
So you think that we may not have a full quorum on April 19th? Or,
You might, I know of two that are going. I'm one of them. If we get one more, the quorum's done.
regardless, when, there's no time limit on when it has to go, that's just
Yep.
how the traditional trajectory has been going. So if we're in a situation like that, and something of this type would just get pushed to the next meeting. So I will just make sure to notify the task force of when it is going to the council, so you can be there.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Then I'll second the motion.
Okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor of referring Title III, Chapter 1, noting the disagreements to the council for their deliberation, please signify by voting aye and raising your hand. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. All right. So that takes us to item 6, review Title III, Chapters 2 through 19.
There's a couple chapters in here that are really easy because they've been repealed, as you can see. When we do go in, through the final codification of this, we'll renumber things and put them in a, like we did with Title II, where we group the commissions together and the departments together, that kind of thing. We'll go ahead and group certain licensing together and that type of thing. So, don't worry about the numbering and where things are placed.
Okay.
I did give you, each should have 2 handouts.
Chapter 15, therapeutic massage, and then,
Right, so similar to how we did with the liquor license, right? We took a comprehensive look at the massage license as well. We looked at the statute and what we could do to make some changes there, to kind of update it, refresh it, make it easier to read. Was there some things that we didn't have in our code that maybe we wanted there? Was there some things that we didn't, if we didn't need it, we could take it out? And so, and then we did try to incorporate any of your comments on the other chapter that still applied to the new chapter.
okay.
So,
Yes,
Can I ask a general question first? So there's a lot to this. There isn't state statute that would oversee it, so we need to have so much detail? That's a question, that's my question.
for the massage license,
Correct.
should we go through the other chapters before we get there?
yeah, but that is generally my understanding, is that there's no comprehensive state ruling on it, so it's been relegated to the cities to determine.
Yes, this is one of those things that cities have been lobbying the state to regulate for us, so that each city doesn't have to. The model that you see that we've put has been one that's been collaborated amongst other cities to put together, and we've modified it to fit Burnsville.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just preparing my notes here. Okay, so what I'd recommend is, I think let's just kind of take it again, kind of procedurally, just page by page. And there are comments, so we can call those out, and we'll just kind of go through, and if we have items for discussion, then we'll go through those. So starting with the very beginning, we see that the packet, which is labeled Review Title III, Chapters 2 through 19, Task Force and Administrative Edits, begins with deleting Chapter 2 Liquor, Chapter 3 Liquor by the Drink, Chapter 4 Signs and Billboards, Chapter 5 Taxi Cabs, Chapter 6 Scavengers, And there's a comment that we recommend deleting this chapter. It's not likely, it is likely not used frequently, if at all. There's, for example, no scavenger license in Crystal City Code. So looks like there's a lot of deletion. And that would take us all the way to chapter 8, where there's some further discussion. So anything, chapters 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't know if 7 ever existed. Reserved, okay.
It was repealed, and that spot was just left as a reserved spot to add something later if we needed it.
Okay. Seeing nothing, we'll go to the next page. It starts with chapter 8, contracts, but it's been, I see 381, work requiring license. And so there's comment from legal counsel on the side that we are recommending the deletion of this chapter. The state already provides a licensing scheme, and it may simply be a repeat. Burnsville could adopt provisions similar to the Crystal City Code. For example, 400.05, licenses required except as otherwise provided in this section. It is unlawful to perform a work subject to the provisions of the building code unless that person is currently licensed to do so under applicable provisions of state law. Such work includes, but is not limited to, electrical installation, plumbing, gas, etc. Reply, I think we should put something in like this. Wondering about permitting, should that be contemplated here? Then reply back, we could if the language are modified. The rest of the city code references building permit requirements quite a lot. I don't think it hurts to modify 387, adopting some language. And member Roush suggested adding solar electrical installation. So it's kind of unclear to me if the city's recommending deleting chapter 8 in its entirety. Would you agree with that, Michelle?
So it looks like one of our attorneys did put that in there, and then there was some back and forth between our attorneys. I would defer to our building official.
Okay, and would you please introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Chris Fasty. I'm the building official for the city of Burnsville. And I do have some notes in here, but I agree with much of what the attorneys have said.
Okay.
With this, and just trying to clear up the language. The state code has some language for municipalities to adopt, and it just encompasses all of the different rules and statutes that come along with plumbing, electrical, building. So we're trying to pull out as much as possible in the municipal code here and just adopt it under how they recommend it.
Okay.
The state building code or Department of Labor and Industry recommends that we adopt the codes as per the commissioners.
So a partial boilerplate remains, but for the most part, 3.8 is removed then, is
Yeah,
what-
there's portions in there, and council or whoever would have to decide. Just an example with licensing, if there's any licensing at all that's done through the state, then we don't have that. We can choose to do some licensing, which we currently do with mechanical license.
Okay, could you tell me about mechanical license? What is that?
So mechanical license for is a mechanical trade, and because they are not regulated by the state other than having a,
Would that be like an auto mechanic, for example?
I'm sorry, for HVAC, so that'd be
Okay.
heating, ventilation, air conditioning,
Okay.
for building purposes, for building structure.
Okay,
And they need a $50,000 bond through the state. And that's all they need to run their business. And we require, on top of that, a license, many municipalities do, to help control some of the contractors that come in, and if they're not doing things correctly on a regular basis, and helps us regulate whether they can do business in our city or not.
can you tell me a little bit about the general requirements of a license holder?
So it's a bond by the state. Our rules are outdated. There used to be some tests that were required, and we need to get rid of those requirements out of here, out of our code, if we're gonna keep that license. So it's really to just have a bond would be the new way of doing business, is just to assure that.
Okay. And if that's already required by the state, why does the city need to say you have to have the bond anyways?
We're required by state law, by the commissioners, as we take on that portion of our statutes, we're required to verify license bonding of all contractors, all different types of contractors in the building industry that require those license.
Okay. Member Ward?
How do you feel that the license actually adds value to the city and doesn't just create an extra burden for legitimate contractors?
Do you want
Can you restate that question again?
Sure, I mean, having to apply for a license to work in our city could be construed as limiting and an extra burden on the business owner, or potentially limiting the number of choices that you and I have as homeowners to employ contractors to do work in our homes or our businesses that reside in the city. So I'm asking, what value does this license really add? And do we really oversee it properly, or is it just a nuisance license? It sounds like a nuisance license.
So what you're really asking, if I heard your question right here, is what's the benefit of licensure?
Yeah, is there a real tangible benefit to the community for,
Well, I
In
think-
addition to the state.
in addition, yeah. Well, the state doesn't require a license, just a
The
bond.
state doesn't require the license, they require the bond be available.
Can I interject?
Sure, certainly.
As a property manager that has to use HVAC and other contractors, to me, there's a level, security's not the right name, but that they're vetted. That they are persons who know what to do with their jobs, especially when you're talking with HVAC and those units are under pressure. You're using refrigerant that needs certain qualifications. So it's one more way of the licensing, and I want to make it as easy as I can for them, but it's also one way for you to know that, yep, they're bonded. Are we making you read the state statute, how many companies are going to? It's much easier to say, here's what you need, here's a reference. So when I have a company that comes into me that has that meets all that, I think that it's better knowing that those companies are there and they've done their due diligence. And there's much more in the business side of it, knowing that you're not having somebody sneaking under the radar, coming in and doing work.
Am I correct that the license that Burnsville offers is merely an affirmation that that contractor is bonded?
Well, the current way that it's written, that is not accurate, is to show that they're qualified to do that work.
And what assessment of qualification do you do?
That was through some older testing that's no longer available through older code groups,
So in effect, there is no qualification
other than the bond
other
right
than the
now.
bond.
Right.
Which the state requires,
Excuse
which
me?
the state requires for their license.
Yep.
That was,
Not for their license, to be a contractor.
I see you, Sarah.
in the-
I'll get to you in a second.
So these are fire, life, health, safety issues, where they're dealing with gas lines and electricity and your ventilation air for your home. And it's just, I think, to answer your question, it's not an opinion of mine, it's just, it's more of a, to give it that they're qualified to do the work, show some sort of competency, really.
I guess that's my concern, is I don't see the license adding that feature. If it actually was intended to add that feature, I think then you need to put some meat behind it and make them prove they're qualified, not use some outdated tests that don't exist anymore. So if our goal is to protect people, I would say that that isn't adequate based on the license requirements currently. Would
That's
you
what-
agree or
That's why
disagree?
I recommend that we remove that part of the language.
Do you mean, chapter 8, in its entirety?
Yeah, it would be on, really, does council want something like this? Then we would have to construct a policy or a way to qualify, like you were saying. But as it is now, we don't have a current way to do that.
Okay, I'll go to Sarah.
I handle insurance for setting up contractors like the HVAC. And I helped one just this last year to renew their bond with the state. And they have to do more than just get the bond. They have to submit an application and prove their business and who the owners are in the business, and also have to show workers' comp if they have employees. The one thing they don't have to submit is their proof of liability, like business liability insurance. So that would be a reason for potentially getting a certificate of insurance from that contractor with the city, like submitting that to the city and saying, hey, I have the proper business insurance, the liability that's needed to do this. The bond is a piece of that. But going through that application process with them just this last year in particular, we had to update new owners. Some of the sons took over the business along with the father. So the state does do a lot of information on the business itself as far as the ownership goes, and then making sure that they have work comp for their employees. And that bond is an application that an insurance company has to submit. And it's not a huge amount of information there, but it is for that, what is required with the state, and it does cover those minimum limits for them there. But from my perspective, for the city, it would be nice to have them probably still have an application and say, hey, I've got business insurance, I've got the liability needed if something does happen on site at a client's, location, and kind of go from there. So that's my little piece.
Does getting a bond require proving business insurance and those items that Sarah mentioned, or is it just, here's $50,000, thank you? More or less. Anyone?
Bond application, you have to submit as a business that's established, but you don't have to prove that you have business insurance to get the bond.
Okay. Yes.
I'm just back at procedural. So if I'm hearing Chris correct, you are agreeing with the attorney who first said, let's delete everything in chapter 8. Whereas what we have in front of us are possible revisions and additions and changes to pieces of chapter 8. So I'm confused. Should we consider these changes, or should we first consider following the recommendation to delete all of chapter 8 and then go back and decide which pieces might say what?
I don't know if this answers the question, but those bonds weren't in place at the time that this city code was adopted, these titles.
I guess I'm way back at, do we need to discuss any of this because there is a recommendation and maybe some people want to follow that recommendation, which I heard you wanted to follow, was to delete all of chapter 8. Did I misunderstand?
It isn't something that whether I want it or not, it's more of a direction of council or you that you want to go with it, and then I can adapt to that. So
All right. I thought I heard you say you agreed with the attorney who suggested removing chapter 8.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes.
Yes, because
You agree that we should
yeah,
follow the attorney's recommendation and delete all of chapter 8.
Yes, because there wasn't a bond in place at the time of that language. I think if you want new language, you come up with new language, but I think we meet the law by just requiring the bond. We have to verify the bond at that point, so if,
And that is written somewhere other than chapter 8.
That would be state code, I would imagine, that requires a
All right.
bond.
Okay.
So if I can make a clarification, Chris, do we need somewhere in our code for it to say that we verify the bond?
The state building code encompasses this with that language that I was talking about. It takes all of the different, rules and statutes and has that as part of the quote, state building code, and that includes many codes.
Okay, so the state building code already requires them to come to us with a bond.
Yeah,
So
We've
we
done
don't
that.
need to put this in here for it to be,
right.
right, okay. So I just want to make sure we weren't missing something that we still needed if
It's
we
a
did
very good
consider
question.
deleting
That
it.
helps.
Josh?
So we're talking bonds, but this is also covering license as well. So, I mean, those are separate aspects when you're going with contractors and getting their bondings, getting their certificates. So if we eliminate this altogether, then are we also eliminating the requirement that the city has for contractors to review and obtain their license?
No, it's in the code
That's,
that we, as a building safety, we need to be reviewing that as part of our
it's all
delegation
about the life safety review.
from the commissioners.
Okay.
When we obtain that, authority having jurisdiction, all those rules come and are applied to us and the citizens and the builders, that they must meet these standards and that we
Correct.
regulate those standards.
And so that's not, if this goes away, that's
Still in
not
place.
skirting any of that
Still
responsibility.
in place, but through the state.
Yeah, okay.
So if we were to delete chapter 8 in its entirety, and we know that an HVAC contractor has the requirement to have a bond, what does the city do? Because we're removing your municipal require of license and verification. What is the city doing to engage with HVAC contractors and verify bonds, or in what way does the city get involved then?
So the state has it all online for verifying any type of license. And so mainly we look at architects, engineers, the bonds for the HVAC, those are all part of one website. There's many other disciplines also that are in there, my disciplines in there. And we verify, and we have this as part of our tracking system and our permit system. So when they come in and they apply, whether it's electronic or in person, it automatically goes to the website, verifies their bond and license. Now, we physically look at that, but it's populated into one of our data streams, and we can.
So to clarify, if a contractor comes to town and they get a permit for HVAC, then that initiates a process whereby the city verifies that they are bonded. But if a HVAC contractor, say, has a business here in Burnsville, but they don't actually do work in Burnsville, then there's nothing that the city does to verify their bond or look at a license, because they're not pulling permits in Burnsville then.
No, and we wouldn't look at whether when they're not doing legal work according to the law, there's really no way for us to know anyways.
Okay, thank you. Member Ward?
You talked about the code requiring these due diligence, life and safety issues, so this doesn't fall under that category at all and would never get reviewed if this licensing requirement goes away?
I don't know if I understand your
Well-
question on that.
So say chapter 8's eliminated. You said there are still reviews that you're required to do per the code, which I assume is the state code.
Yes, the state, correct.
Okay, and there's nothing in the state code that would encourage you to review HVAC contractors?
Only their bond, and then their inspections themselves. So there's
The actual-
required inspections that come along with their permit and application and the work that they do.
Plan review.
Plan review
For new
also.
construction.
Yeah.
Okay, so we would look at that.
with certain types of buildings. It just depends on the job that we're doing, and then we have required review and inspections and documents, required documents that are required to be submitted. Typically with residents, there's a lot of exemptions to that, but with commercial buildings, industrial, anything to do with those properties would require a complete set of plans. That means all the registered licensed people that are required by law to be as part of that design and submittal.
And do we have any data that shows the history of this and how it's worked in cities that don't regulate or have a specific license for this? Is that available?
I don't have any.
I'm not aware of any. What I wanted to remind everybody here too is this isn't just about residential HVAC. This is also commercial properties and public gathering areas such as this building. So when we look at this particular way that we regulate, it does have a huge effect, and this is part of that too.
Yeah, that's back to the original question I was asking is,
Right.
how does it really have effect?
Member Roush?
Well, I'll let you finish your question, then I'll.
No, go ahead.
Well, I think that,
Oh.
see if I got it right. I'm just checking myself to see if I'm right, see if that answers your question. So to do commercial work, you gotta get a permit. And the permit process requires you guys to check the state database to make sure they're bonded
Credentials.
and licensed, and then they have to have their plans, and you review the plans. Plans are adequate, they do the work. If they do the work, then you do the inspection, and then it's all signed off, correct?
Correct.
So here's my question. I think one of the legal counsel said something about liability. So at the state bonding level, do they require contractors that are certified to also have liability insurance? No?
No, I don't know that, but
Sarah's
says
indicating
no.
So then, my other question is, how do other cities handle that?
Most cities require a mechanical license for that, so they can verify, and then they write it into their ordinance or their code of how they want it to be. And it just has to make sure that you're not overlapping the state codes and how you look at it. Like, we couldn't require another bond. If there was a license requirement, like with plumbing, I can't require another plumbing license from them. And they were doing this at Minneapolis, St. Paul, Rochester, Duluth, where they were requiring additional license. And then that's actually where the language came from to go into our code that I'm asking that we remove because things have changed over time, and so people followed suit. They always had, most of them always had a licensing requirement for that to show some sort of competency, whatever that was. But at this point, this language is not relevant really to what's going on. We'd have to create our own language beyond that bond and understand it's a bond, not a license.
No, I understand. My question was, how do we handle liability insurance, or how did the other cities handle that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, Sarah knows.
So,
I know a little bit.
Sarah, if you could.
There are a lot of cities who require a certificate of insurance for the liability, and I guess my question to Burnsville is, I had to produce one for the city of Burnsville as well for his liability insurance at the end of the year for that too. So that is part of the online application process. Is that right? I couldn't get into that online application process from the Burnsville city website. So that was a piece that was required that I understood, and I produced that for this particular contractor.
Currently, we require this. We haven't changed the law yet, so we're going under the old, and we're requiring the license.
But not a certificate of insurance as a matter of attaining a license or certifying with Burnsville.
I don't know. Joel, do you know that one?
I don't know what you're doing as far as the application online or in paper. I think what I'm hearing though is that we don't have a current requirement in the ordinance. Our initial recommendation recommending deletion of the chapter seems to be buttressed by the comments made tonight. And I guess I'd reaffirm that we delete the section, and if we subsequently decide that we should require licensure with insurance, we could look at adopting a new ordinance for it, but we're not currently doing it. And we are authorized to check for state license and state bonds as part of the application for the actual building permit, which seems consistent with what we've been doing, and it doesn't need an ordinance provision to continue to do that.
Okay. Member Hull, you had a.
All my questions have been answered, thank you.
Okay, so if I'll suggest something that, we're talking about, I think we generally agree that 8 as written today, needs to be either altered significantly to add some sort of qualification, verification mechanism, or it needs to be removed. Because right now it's saying you have to have a license, and the license is just a re-verification of a bond.
Right.
So I would suggest that for the purpose of discussion, I would like to throw out that we assume 8 has been removed in its entirety, it no longer exists, and then I'll ask this question. Would we like to impose any requirement upon someone who wishes to do HVAC work in the city that they X, Y, Z, some sort of qualification, whether it just be proof of insurance, obtain a certificate of insurance, in order to do business as a contractor in the city? I think that's really the question before us is, do we want to impose a requirement? And if so, what requirement?
Or, I'll give you an alternate proposal, I like
Okay.
where you're going. Or we state, since the state doesn't require insurance, oddly enough, we say buyer beware. That as part of your building, as part of selecting your contractor, you should verify insurance.
That was gonna be
Very
my,
least.
I was gonna suggest, in our printed material, because I know there's like some of these, best practices, things that we do, like if you're gonna do a project, you take it home, you got a piece of paper, you look to them and say, these are the buyer beware things, these are the things these are a list of things you ask your contractor for before you do business, and you put it in the hands of the homeowner.
So, Chris, as the expert, if we start at nothing, then is there something that you would recommend that we require as qualification?
I don't feel like that's my place. I think that comes from you or council. I really don't.
Let me try to challenge that a bit and say, as an expert, certainly it is the council ultimately that decides that, but is there something that you think would be, I mean, there certainly must be requirements that we could suggest that you would think as a professional would be a bad idea, like they all be redheaded, for example. That wouldn't make any sense, right? So are there any qualifications that would seem common to a person that is an expert in the field that we might consider requiring?
Joel, can you help me on this one? I don't know how I can recommend something when that isn't what I'm delegated really to do in this.
I
in this-
think as a subject matter expert in working in the field, the question is, are you familiar with or what do you know of qualifications you could recommend to the city to consider adopting? We would have to take a look at what some of the other cities that require licensure do for qualifications and see if we wanted to adopt or emulate what they've done. But I think that would be a separate follow-up discussion. And right now, we're not situated to fashion that type of recommendation. That would be something the task force could have a study and come back with subsequently if there's an interest. But so far, the state hasn't adopted a concrete set of licensure requirements, and they haven't determined a statewide need for it. And absent some examples or experience within the city, we wouldn't have any basis to say we should follow the suit of Minneapolis or Rochester or Duluth whoever might have a licensure system in place. We are recommending following suit with other cities on the therapeutic massage or massage therapy area because we have had some experience in that. But we just haven't had that with HVAC. We haven't had any serious issues, and that's why originally we recommended deletion of the chapter.
Thank you. Member Godin?
Yeah, I have worked for over 50 years in with an architect and also in a corporation in construction all over the country. And our approach, I mean, this is for a big corporation, so is that we did not even check whether the particular contractor was licensed or not, but past experience, and we did the buyer beware kind of a investigation on the contractors. That's how we did that. And I followed something like that when I did my own home. But then only after I selected the contractor, they went to the city and got the license. So in almost all cases, the owner, whether I was doing it for myself or for a corporation, we did our own, I did my own due diligence, if you want to call it.
Thank you.
I see these as separate issues completely, because
Okay.
you've got life safety is what you're all concerned about coming, and it's really being driven by the state code, and you're following that, making sure that all the license and bonds and insurances, or not insurances, but certificates, and credentials are spoken for, so that there's a life safety standpoint from the GC, all the subs, and everybody down the line, including the occupancy that takes over. The rest of it comes down to protection, insurances, which is
Money.
completely outside of that scope. And so I can see this going away from the aspect of all the life safety is taken care of through the code, as well as through what you are mandated by the state to be able to verify through every contractor and sub that comes through. The rest of it is a personal, this is of interest to me, whether I want to have insurance for my home or not, or my car or not. That's a smart or an unwise decision that I have to make for myself. And so I don't see that that's going to fall into here, and that's going to be an ever so changing, unique case-by-case situation. So from that standpoint, I can see how Chapter 8 would go away in its entirety.
That makes sense. Board?
I have a question. Did you say that the HVAC folks are running gas lines?
If they are qualified to do it, those qualifications are falling under the plumbing code. So if they meet, we have some groups that are, they run both of those companies, sometimes electrical, plumbing, and then they just have to fall under that licensing requirement by the state for the plumbing license and get the gas line work as a journeyman plumber or a master plumber.
And the city would inspect that regardless of whether we have this particular contractor licensed.
Yep.
My concern was more somebody who didn't have control over their situation, like in a residential apartment building, not getting potentially that attention and not having control over their decision. So the buyer beware was a little concerning in that case, but I think we're okay.
Just to expand a little bit on that, we require testing of those gas lines for almost any length to assure that they meet a certain pressure for a certain period of time.
Thank you, I needed to understand that.
So I think then the question to us is, do we want the city to take an action item to look and see what other cities do and come back with a potential recommendation? Or are we satisfied that because the life and safety items are handled by state code, that buyer beware? And maybe we should put something in the documentation that we send out, because we do a good job in messaging, but that's a separate issue.
I don't want to be naive and say that I wouldn't be interested to see what other cities and jurisdictions have been doing. Although that's, again, I'm going to go back, it's going to be a case-by-case situation. So I know that we have, we've got the international building code for state. We also have our individual state code as well. So I feel like that's really far-reaching and very broad and can get very granular as well. But I guess having an understanding of maybe what, from a high level, from what other cities provide could be beneficial, but not to get in the weeds to really throw us off course either.
I would recommend that it would be current language that somebody's recently adopted.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a great
So we
clarification.
don't have to go around to all these different municipalities that
Starting
haven't
right where we're
updated their
at.
codes.
Right back to where we started.
Yeah, we're 20 years out of date, too.
Yeah, with the buyer beware on there, there's a lot of times that people don't know what somebody needs to be licensed for, what somebody should pull a permit for, what somebody should do this stuff for. Say, well, I didn't see anything in your code, I don't have it in your rules, so it doesn't apply to me. So unfortunately, there is a small, to me, category of some language being there, so hey, yes, you do need to have some due diligence here. Doesn't need to be all as encompassing, and taking out a lot of this stuff I think is great. But unfortunately, there's just enough out there for people, because I had a homeowner who sold his home, and he had to put a brand new water heater in again because the person that sold it to him didn't buy the mobile home water heater and didn't get it right. So that water heater was two things. It was one, it was incorrect, which is a hazard. Nobody would know that hazard because the person didn't pull it until it came around and they talked to me and I said, yeah, that's a permit item. So not everybody's gonna know that stuff right away. As far as our business goes, if you don't have insurance, you're not registered with the state, and you can't show me the right language, you're not working on my property. But again, a lot of people might not, or they might unfortunately go to the dollar.
So could I, let me see if I have this right. If you are a bonded HVAC expert or say a licensed plumber, you know what jobs require permits and what don't. So
Depends on the city.
any professional would know what permits are required in inspections. Is that?
Doesn't mean they'll pull a permit.
Right.
But if they're not gonna pull a permit, that doesn't mean that they're gonna ignore the city code anyways.
So that would actually be, anyone needs to know. Anyone, any citizen needs to know when permits are required. That's their responsibility to inquire, whether you're a contractor or a homeowner.
Well,
How many
if it's your
average,
first house, you have
Yeah.
no idea what the
Yeah.
hell a permit is, and,
Right?
the average consumer
But the
has no
city
clue.
code won't
Oh,
solve that.
Still,
but you probably
to
wouldn't go to
inquire.
the city code. You don't have any clue that any of that would be needed.
You
You
don't
just
know what
need
you
a new
don't know.
water
It's
heater.
my house, I
You
can do
don't,
what I
you
want.
call ABC Plumbing and rely on ABC Plumbing to.
We see it a lot.
Yeah. You can't control that. The people
Right.
that don't know what they don't know.
No,
And the
but I
people
mean,
that
I've
do
had-
know sometimes do the same things, like, well, that's gonna cost me money and time, I don't wanna do that.
I've
It
had the
costs you
city
life,
out
too.
several times because I was remodeling my property. They had to do the furnace, the electrical panel, the water heater. I mean, I basically gutted the house. They've been out there so many times. It's like, they need to check that. And every time somebody's coming out. But you know what? That's also a comfort too, as a homeowner, knowing that the city's going to be overseeing that to some extent.
Yeah, It's all
So,
life safety.
so if it's a question of education, then certainly the code is not
It's
the
not-
Right.
vehicle
To do
for
that.
that education.
Right.
Because who's gonna think to look there? No one. Member Goodine?
Well, we would.
Yeah, I was wondering, as a owner, from an owner's side, how we covered ourselves when I was working as an architect and engineer is that these codes need to be, are applicable. We made a statement, so, but whether that's is this an appropriate place here to say that, I don't know, but, to address the issue of having the wrong material or whatever was provided, the codes has to be applied is is the wording that we used.
But general language does allow for that, and it, you know, if we removed what's here and we make sure that it's in the building code portion of our ordinance and we're using the state commissioner's language to adopt, we will be covered for those types of issues.
Is that already there, or when you take it out, do you need to put that kind of a, which code, how it is assigned, should be written in somewhere else in the building code? Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
as we go through this, there is, you will see that most of what's being taken out is because it has been replaced or has some language in place already that covers that.
So, would we like to see the city find if there are modern examples of city code that address this and come back and inform us of that? Would we like them to take that as an action item?
From a high level, maybe?
Yeah.
High level, maybe, okay.
Yeah. From a high level, yes.
So is anyone, I'm seeing several yeses, is anyone flatly opposed to it?
I don't
To be
see the
educated. It
time
feels like a
value
waste
of
of time to me, but.
Okay, so 3 people say no, a couple people say maybe. I'm gonna say that the no's are not greater than the maybe there. If someone wants to say, no, let's not do that, we
I
can.
could
but-
also do my own research.
Sure. Would it be okay if, could we ask the city to look at and see if there are some modern examples and if there's something we might glean from that to take away? Okay,
Keep in mind, what we're doing here is very important, but our staff also has day jobs.
Yeah.
And they're doing a lot of work.
I can do my own
And-
research.
Yeah, and they're understaffed. Our whole city is understaffed right now, and we're trying to deal with that issue. So when you put on a study like this, it can take them months before they can come back with something decent for you. So if you want something to do like that, it's gotta be really important that you get that done.
Would not be
Because
worth the time
otherwise,
spent.
you're gonna delay this for a long time, and you're gonna spend a lot of staff time doing things. You're kinda going down rabbit holes with that. That's just my 2 cents worth. This is your committee, but
okay.
I just want you to be aware that we are short-staffed in the city. We are trying to deal with it right now.
That's important information for us
That is-
when we're making
that answers it
decisions
for
like
me.
that, yeah.
Okay, so do we feel different after that then? Would anyone like to change their vote and say, their informal vote and say, now let's not have the city pursue it?
I don't feel it's vital for them to pursue it anymore personally, but I think we have a very unclear direction. I'm hearing we're inserting and we're completely striking, and so I think we need to get some very clear direction through appropriate motions
Yes,
on how we're gonna act on this evening.
yes, I agree. Member Godin?
Yeah, I was thinking in the same direction, but my question is whether if we go and find the building code section and say that this is covered this way, at least we know when we take it out, this is how it's going to happen.
Well, I think because it's a building code item, that would be life and safety, which necessarily the type of things that we would be suggesting are not life and safety items, because we don't have the authority to recommend those changes. That's controlled by the state. Is that?
Is it as simple as, what I'm hearing you say is you want to see the words, building codes, we're using the state codes? Just
Whether-
that simple, basically. I think we've had that in other chapters that, just see state statute XYZ for this information.
Well,
Is
two
that,
ways. One is you can put it here, or we can be educated by saying, these are the safety codes which already covers this. So either way, we are educated as we go forward, is all I'm saying.
Okay. I will propose that we delete chapter 8 in its entirety. I'm gonna start with that. Can I get a second on that?
second?
Okay, seconded by Member Naiston. All those in favor of deleting, we should probably have some discussion. Is there further discussion on the merits of deleting chapter 8 in its entirety? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of deleting chapter 8 in its entirety, say aye and raise your hand. Aye. All those opposed, say nay and raise your hand. Okay. Donna and
Wait, can you keep
Shelley.
those up for a second? I'm trying to type as fast as I can. Thank you.
Donna and Shelley, nay. The ayes have it. Chapter 8 is removed. Okay. So before we move out of this section, if anyone has a concrete proposal, like I'd like to see liability insurance required, Steve?
So then, what would it be, 3.8.1?
Probably.
State code governs licensure, bonding and other requirements. Anybody contracting, in effect, anybody contracting should assess liability coverage and qualifications of contractors before they, contract with them, right?
I think that's a great message, but I don't think that it's an ordinance.
It's still gonna be driven by the state.
State
Not on
mandated.
liability.
Oh, not on the
Not on liability.
Sarah?
I think it would be a nice warning to put on like the city website for informational purposes for that kind of thing, but I agree that I don't think it needs to be in the code unless we're going to, tell them, to make, the requirement of being insured properly or something like that for the liability.
So how would the city does a lot of great things with communication. Would it be a reasonable place to put in permitting, say, hey, by the way, people don't actually have to have a license or insurance for this, they just have to be bonded? Would that be a lot of effort, or?
I believe it already does
Okay,
on the website.
okay, perfect.
And I think everybody in this room might know that we've really undergone some changes with not only our online system, but also our web pages lately. It's something I believe is already in place. We want people to know that up front, and that's kind of the standard practice there.
Also refer them to Attorney General's office. There's some language in there and how to hire your contractors and who to hire, and then Department of Commerce for their licensing requirements, bonding requirements, and
We get,
those, what will happen here is the enforcement will go more towards the state than the local body.
we give, I think, plenty of notice out there. We've got out on the wall out here, information for anybody who's considering a project to understand what those concepts are up front. Granted, there's a portion of the population that may not understand it,
You wouldn't even know.
or English is an issue, or something along that line, but we have staff here that can answer those questions too.
Okay. So anything, I'm personally feeling that I think we got it covered. The city's done sounds like a good job on messaging, and we've agreed to remove 8. Is there further discussion on HVAC contractors before we move to, I think, plumbers in 9? Okay, so plumbers and pipe fitters, the city's recommending we remove it. I would agree with that. Any comments on that? Points of dialogue? Plumbers actually have to have licenses, right?
Yes,
Okay.
That's a
Seeing,
state statute though, right? Okay.
yes.
seeing nothing, that takes us to chapter 10, which is on electricians. And again, the recommendation is we delete this because it's covered by state statute. Okay, so, without disagreement, we'll move on to chapter 11, which is plumbers again, I guess. And it looks like recommendation to strike the entirety of that. Without objection, we'll proceed to chapter 13, used or secondhand motor vehicles. I guess chapter 12 doesn't exist. Oh, sorry, it was reserved, also stricken. 13, these are licensed by the state. I'm not sure what we're doing it anyway. Let's just delete it. I concur. Okay.
Helpful.
Yes. And that takes us to, through 14 and to therapeutic massage, which I think is really, with the remainder of the time we have tonight, really is the large body of work that we have before us, as this is something the state doesn't regulate and is up to the city to determine what they want to do. So that, we start with 15.1, which just lays out the purpose, and to 15.2, which is the definitions, accredited program, accredited institution, those appear to be new terms. There's been just some minor tweaks from therapeutic massage to massage and massage therapy. And that takes us to 15.3, which is license required. And it says reworked section to separate out massage business and massage therapists and added both to clarify the requirements of both licenses.
Where are you seeing those comments that you're reading off?
I see it both in the document on the, so
Oh,
this
the
is
separate one.
the other hand up.
All right.
353.
What's the difference between the one that's stapled within the packet and the separate one?
It doesn't have the comments that he just read off. So you want to use the separate one.
So,
I discovered.
Yes.
Mr. Balls, Josh?
Oh, yes.
The one in the full packet is the existing code.
Okay.
The extra packet that I handed out tonight is the rework of the massage license code that we did, comparing it to state statute and to other modernly revised, cities that modernly revise their massage license, to try to bring it up to date and clean it up.
Oh, okay.
What we also did try to incorporate any notes that you had in the old one as well, to make sure that those were addressed.
Oh, okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Question about this, say for example, 315.3, ordinance 1381, is that a city ordinance or a state ordinance?
City.
City ordinance, okay. So should we say that it is a city ordinance?
I think that's implied.
It's, okay, if everybody understands?
Actually, once we adopt this, they'll all be updated with a new ordinance number with the new, when we adopt the new ordinance. So these are just leftovers
Oh,
from
okay.
when they were adopted before by the city
Oh,
council.
okay, yeah, thank you.
So I think that the first comment is, 15.3, the city's empowered to conduct any and all investigations to verify the information on new and renewal applications submitted under this section, including ordering a computerized criminal history inquiry and/or driver's license / identification history inquiry on the applicant. All licensed applicants shall pass a background check. Member Nystuen suggested that we just shorten the sentence to say, the city is empowered to conduct background checks.
But you're,
I don't see that here.
I'm
You're
not
still on
seeing
the
what
old
you're-
one?
You're on,
Am I?
yeah.
current,
I apologize.
yeah.
I have both copies in front of me and I'm switching between them, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
stop doing that. Close this, look at this one.
Can I get a, I'm sorry, can I get a paper?
Oh, yeah. I thought it happened. Does anybody else not have it?
Yeah, I don't have one.
This one?
Thank you very much. Whoops.
Sorry about that. Now that I'm on the right page.
Sorry.
I worked very hard to get on the right page, so
So 315,
I don't want to use it.
Wait, no.
so the new packet has been completely renumbered?
It is renumbered, yes.
Okay,
Because there were some sections that were removed
okay.
and some sections that were added.
But incorporated comments that people had
Yep.
previously, regardless of
That
whether
was
it's
our intent.
the right number or
Yep, we
not.
captured them all.
Great.
Okay.
I have a question here. Now, are we still keeping the chapter 15, this 315, because we already eliminated 10 and 11 and 12 and all
It'll
that?
be renumbered eventually, if we adopt it. So it'll go probably to 2.
Oh, okay,
something
then
like
the
that.
city will do that, okay.
Yeah, yep, they'll
Just
figure it
curious.
out. Yep.
Yeah, the numbering and, numbering, capitalizations, any of that kind of, housekeeping type work,
Yeah.
we will take care of it before it goes to the council for final approval.
Yeah, that was in chapter 1, or title 1 that we approved.
We do appreciate
Yep.
whenever you let us know that we find a typo or, you know, like if there's a typo in there or something, we do appreciate that, because that maybe we don't catch, but we do look to make sure that everything's uniform, renumber everything, because we're not gonna have all these reserved chapters that should be just eliminated in there,
Yeah.
right? We'll just renumber everything.
Thank you, Michelle. So let's look at 315.4 license exceptions. This is a new section. I don't see any comments on it. Yes.
315.1 was a new section, and we didn't review that.
You're right. I apologize. That
That's
was my
okay.
confusion. 315.1, purpose, comments or questions on that section? Yes.
I'll ask one, and this is a general question. So when we looked at the liquor requirements, we said standalone business, they have to be spread out. And I think the original purpose behind that was to make sure that they were distributed around the city, people would have access, but they wouldn't be on every street corner. There's nothing in therapeutic massage similar to that. Is that an omission, or is that what we like?
You're asking me that question?
Well, I don't know who else to ask.
I didn't
Dan.
create that ordinance, but.
So he passes the buck to me.
I can add a
Yes.
little to that
In theory, it's a
question,
legitimate
actually.
business.
You know, it can be very common for, let's say, chiropractic offices to locate in similar neighborhoods. And so it would seem unlikely that we would want to, and a lot of chiropractic offices hire massage therapists within their office, right? So, and then we also have massage and mental health office. And we also have massage, and so they can just pop up in so many different places. It would be very difficult to regulate some sort of separation between them.
Okay.
And I think that alcohol is generally referred to as, you know, kind of the sin tax, for example. I don't think massage therapy has that stigma.
Not legitimate massage therapy.
A little different kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. The one like,
So 15.2,
IT shop, massage therapy.
definitions, and then 15.3 license required. And anything in 15.1, 2, 3, or 4 to comment on? Michelle?
15.4, the license exception, so this was not in our code before. However, we do have sometimes massage therapists that come for like an event type of thing, right? It could be,
Chair massage.
maybe, yes, a chair massage, at some sort of a show or something. It could be, we could also maybe have somebody who comes into town to do like a bridal party or something like that. You know, I would say, we're saying that these people who don't regularly perform massage, as long as they're licensed somewhere, we don't mind that they come to Burnsville occasionally. What did we do? Is there a
3
limit?
days.
3 days, yep, 3
Three-
days, it's
yeah.
F. Yep.
Yeah, not more than 3 days.
That's an F.
Correct.
Yep. 15.4.
Three days, what length of time?
A day.
No, I mean, 3 times a year, 3 times
3 days, and no more than 3 days in length. It doesn't, do we have a maximum for the year?
No,
I
we
don't think
don't.
so.
So someone could take a day off, 3 days, take a day off, 3 days, take a day off, and just kind of
Yeah, we can
offer
certainly add
massages.
something.
We could add something to limit it to no more than 3 days per month. Or, do you have a recommendation for that? I mean,
I would say a maximum days per year, so like 3 days in three consecutive days or no more than 15 days per month or something like that, or, that's just an arbitrary number, but That's
Yeah,
my suggestion.
we
I
don't
don't
have
know there'd
any
be frequency
precedent
throughout
for
the year, I think
this.
it would just,
But this is something, we know that this happens, and so we wanted to address it in our code so that people wouldn't feel like they were violating the code to attend some, chiropractor event that had massage chairs at it or something like that. Because we don't feel like that's a valid resource for us to try to license those people that are very transient in our community. And so we wanted to address that in here somehow, but we did not think about the,
Yeah, the total.
So
the total.
I would propose that we say 3 days in length and not to exceed 30 total days in a year.
Okay.
That seems like that gives them an opportunity to get a license then if they really do intend to be establishing business practice in Burnsville.
I'm good.
Yeah, that's like 12% of their
Yeah.
time if they're gonna.
Yep, okay. So
We're in
noted that.
agreement, consensus, great.
Okay,
I'm,
Nancy?
I don't want to get deep in the weeds, believe me, but I'm not sure why beauty culturists can massage greater parts of the body than barbers in item C.
See,
That was,
You haven't,
they're
Chris, you're,
licensed by the state.
yeah, they are.
I mean, really, is it like women get massages and men don't, or,
We all know better than that.
I don't know, it just feels like some extremely old sexist something.
it seems to me like it's two different licenses from the state that are covering two different things, so therefore, if you're a beauty culturist, you are your license or
You're allowed to
are
do.
you demonstrate that you're trained to actually touch these other parts of the body as per state touching requirements, I guess.
I think the intention there is to delineate that, so it's clear on where the line is. If you're licensed as a cosmetologist, barber by the state of Minnesota,
It's an exception.
this is what you can do,
Yeah.
otherwise you can't. I think that's the intention.
Okay.
Or
All right.
or just say,
Something.
instead of the extra words, just say, or by state statute. Period. Then we don't get
I
into
don't
it.
think we have a state statute, though.
For barber and,
Licensing.
the other one.
So I think what you're saying is for C, say persons otherwise licensed by state statute.
Okay.
So
Right.
if you're a barber and that means you can
Do-
touch
Do the
someone
barber
from
stuff.
Do barber
hand to
massage.
elbow, that you're not precluded from doing this.
Yes.
I think that's interesting language. That definitely puts the burden, I guess, probably back on the city to know if someone is doing something unqualified, but that kind of already exists. So that makes sense to me. So I think specifically we're
So
looking at
go to the
changing
barber for a manual.
15.4C to be persons otherwise licensed by the state.
And similarly, for D, we could also say, places exempted by state statute, and we could list a couple of examples under
Yep.
each, that kind of thing.
Yep.
I'll be pedantic. We are obviously not saying that plumbers who are licensed by the state can give massages. I don't think.
I didn't say licensed, I said exempted by state statute.
Thank you. That's a great clarification. Persons otherwise exempted by state statute.
And
Yeah.
places otherwise exempted by state statute, that
Yes.
kind of thing.
That
So-
that is the great caveat. Okay, I'd like that. Other people seem to like it. No one opposed? Okay. Anything else in 4? Okay.
Good.
That takes us to 5, license applications. So this has been renamed. There's a comment that, A, an applicant for a massage therapy license must demonstrate, it says confusing language rephrased from the city manager or designee. So I think this is just saying this is the simplified language, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. And then, in 5A, 2A, one of the following must be submitted. It says removed inconsistency of whether a diploma and/or transcripts are needed to be submitted if the school is out of state. Okay.
Can
I don't think that's how you
I
spell
ask
lube.
a clarification? When you say employment by or owns a therapeutic massage business licensed by the city, if somebody was an independent contractor and just did not happen to own a business other than self-employing, would they be required to get a massage business license?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
The massage business license does include the owner or proprietor to be licensed, if they're qualified.
Yeah, I
So
just
they
didn't
don't
know
have
what
to
else
get
had
the two
changed
So that
along, so they don't have
if
two
If you're a
licenses.
massage
Yeah.
enterprise, you don't have to go out and get a massage therapist license also, so that just seemed too duplicative.
15.6, insurance, new, consistent with statutes in other cities, so requiring proof of liability insurance. 15.7, license period, renamed from expiration of license. And then a note that the sentence "and 90 days have elapsed since the denial became final." It's not necessary to wait 90 days, the issue's been resolved.
Sounds good.
15.8, license fees, that was renamed, and then generally A, B, and C, this section was added to reflect the current practice of proration from the licensing scheme. 15.8.1, license fee payment, that's a new section, detailing what they do. 15.8.2, license fee refunds, this looks like it was moved around. Criminal background investigation, new sections piling all the background check.
Andrew?
Yes.
Could you please slow down? We had a new section and we haven't seen it yet necessarily, so I guess I'd kind of like to not be in the next section while I'm still trying to read it.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'm looking at 15.9, but if there's issues previously.
That's good.
I also assume we could come back at our next meeting if something comes up in the meantime.
Absolutely.
That
We're not voting.
we're not done
Right.
next
Okay.
time.
Right, this would come back next month with, any already recommended changes. And then you would, if you've had something additional at that
Okay.
point, we could still change before it sends to the council, before we adopt the final version.
Okay. So 15.9 lays out that there are criminal background investigations. That would take us to 15.10, which has several subsections. Steve?
Why 18 and not 21?
For, can you refer me to the exact?
A is not 18. Why not 21? Drinking is what?
So
18?
315.
315,
315.1A, so this
is
says,
getting
no
a
therapeutic
license.
massage business license or massage therapy license will be issued to a person who is not 18 years of age or older at the time of application, is submitted to the issuing authority. And Steve's question is, why not 21?
I can say that I believe the massage therapy, schools would allow people to, at 18.
Okay. And that's the reason.
I think that it's very likely, or very possible, that somebody under the age of 21 could be completely, perfectly licensed by, or certified by the state, that, got their massage degree, what have you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
B,
okay. Has been
Felony.
convicted of a felony or any sexually oriented crime or ordinance violation, or has been determined to have engaged in any conduct prohibited by Minnesota statutes 146A.08.
I'm sorry, can you
What
show
section?
me where you're at again?
Yeah, 315.10, 1,
Okay.
B.
B. The question is, can we strike the word felony and just go with sexual oriented crimes?
Unless it's murder.
What, I don't,
I'm assuming that there might be some concern that if you are a thief or you use someone else's name or,
Rapist.
otherwise
That would be-
misrepresenting yourself, that might be also a concern that you're running a business that,
Violent crimes are not
Is this
necessarily sexually oriented, and they would also be somebody I wouldn't want to see licensed. That would fall under felonies usually.
You got the word "or" between both felony and sexually, so you've got bases covered there.
Yeah.
Can I provide a counterpoint?
Please do.
I could support this, no problem at all. I keep going back to somebody is convicted of something, they go to prison, they do their time, they come out. And we would like them to get a job somehow, some way, right? I just don't want to restrain them from having a job unless what they originally offended for is directly applicable to this. That would be I just think you should consider that, because if you put the word felony in, it could totally not relate to this, and you might therefore be restricting someone from getting a job.
I think there's just a comma missing, because we have a 5 years after the date of the application. So if there was a comma, the comma is there, I'm sorry.
But
So, because it covers the whole clause, the way it's written with that comma, within 5 years of the date of application applies to all the prior criteria. You could clarify the sentence structure,
of a
but
felony associated with a sexually oriented mishap or something to that degree.
I don't know, I just want to make sure.
I read it as that the felony has to happen within the 5 years preceding the application
Application.
date. So within 5 years of the date of the application,
Right,
so it sounds to me
and
like 5 years.
I get your point. We like to think that we rehabilitate people. You may not have had a sentence imposed of 5 years, so it could be 3 years since your aggravated assault that has now been resolved and you're a reformed person
Correct.
and should be able to do it.
Well, then I would say the expungement would be the process for those persons.
exactly.
Because in my industry, we're Kerry Koskinen, and that's pretty tight and pretty similar to this with the number of years and the categories and all that stuff, and you don't deviate. And unfortunately, it went in for a reason. So I think this is good to have the way it is, especially with the 5 years. Because I think a lot of people don't understand there are mitigating ways to get that expungement. It's a process. But there are ways that have done what they done, do their due diligence, have done, and, you know, whatever you want to call it. So I think by having that 5 years, it doesn't say forever. So it's not just saying, if you've ever had a felony or if you've ever done this, you ain't working in this business, boy. So I like the fact that there are those things with the time frame, and there are things that people can do for that too.
I agree. I don't think 5 years is an excessive amount of time for somebody who has committed a felony to be rehabilitating themselves to become a good member of society again, especially if they're serving time as part of that.
Could I suggest that, I mean, we're not saying that, it seems to me that, that using the word felony, and I agree with Steve, that any felony, is a standard that is too high, within 5 years. I don't see how that's relevant to the license. I mean, if someone steals a car, and then they go to jail for it, and they, spend 1 year in jail, why should that matter if they want to be a massage therapist?
There is no industry in the country that doesn't preclude felonies in a background check as a disqualifier for a licensed activity.
Which is a problem in
I
our
don't think that
society
is a
because
problem.
the people cannot be employed.
I
but-
think if you've committed a crime that is
You
graded
should
as a felony,
never
it's a
have a-
serious issue. They don't just,
I know.
I agree.
Problem is that I think massage therapists, I don't want to say it's a low bar to entry, but it's definitely a much lower bar to entry than other licensed professions, and that's not to denigrate it. But should we also then, out of the good of the community, say that you can't work at a grocery store if you've been involved in a felony? Because after all, you could steal from someone at the cash register or take their keys out of their bag and steal their car. I mean,
grocery
how
stores
how
won't
far
hire
do
you.
we continue this?
SA won't hire you if you've had a felony. Anything where they're dealing with cash or people's safety or bodies, that is a standard background check. I can't even hire them as an agent on the phones at my company. And that's federal law, not state. So I don't see this as being a problem personally, but it sounds like there are people who are much more concerned about giving criminals opportunities to become licensed. And I'm not in favor of that personally, so I mean, I think we can just disagree on that.
I mean, I think that, C, which says, has been convicted of a felony and required to register as a predatory offender, I think that certainly is very applicable.
No debate.
I would propose, the deletion of the word felony from item B, so that it would read, has been convicted of a sexually oriented crime or ordinance violation, or has been determined to have been engaged in any, that's the rest of it.
Michelle's had her hand up like this whole time.
Sorry, Michelle.
I just was thinking, maybe we could tighten up that language a little bit, so it would be more, instead of just felony as a whole, we could maybe tighten up that language, so it would say things like, cause bodily harm, or something like that. If they were a violent person that, with a felony, that would still, I think, be you would wanna know that within
Associated
5
with.
years.
Yep.
And then the car theft maybe
Rather than
wouldn't
Bernie
show
Mac.
up, wouldn't count at all. That kind of massage that language to address the concerning parts, but
Good pun.
get rid of the less concerning parts.
That's why you're the city clerk.
My only question with that is, do you introduce like gray terms where now it's somebody's feeling of like, are you creating like who's the arbitrator of the word violent and those kind of things? Like, I understand where you're going with that. My only concern is that if you have made a decision and you ended up in a criminal activity that is deemed as a felony, given the way that our court system works, it has to be a very grave situation for you to really get a felony a lot of days nowadays. Otherwise, you're going to plead down. If you are convicted of a felony, I am with the 5-year reset, I don't understand why you can't go into a societal timeout for 5 years and say, it's time for you to reset and think about this for a little bit, and then after 5 years, come back and do business with us. I think we just leave it as it is.
Joel, is there a language that we could use that would classify a type of felony that is against a person or violent or indicates predatory behavior?
We could fashion something, most of those would be an assault or crime against the person with force or coercion of some type. That's the major concern is persuasion or inappropriate behavior, and touching is inherent in the therapeutic massage area, and so what constitutes force is an inherently ambiguous term that we'd be involved in as far as disqualification for past conduct. And arguably, the current code provisions are vague as well. Whether we go with the existing code language or the new language, we have that same potential vagueness to deal with.
So it sounds like we could potentially craft something, but it doesn't appear that it immediately leaps out at you as far as.
No, I mean, the current language, we use sexually oriented crime, and obviously even that is vague. The way this usually is handled procedurally is we provide a notice of disqualification for any licensed applicant, and under state law and our ordinance provisions, they have a right to challenge that and have it reviewed and request a hearing to determine whether or not an administrative hearing officer thinks there's basis for the disqualification. And that's where some of these things get sifted out on a case-by-case basis, depending on, what state they were convicted in, what the nature of the crime was, what the background was. And so each of these are very fact-intensive, so the primary disqualification is to try to narrow it a little bit to convictions for crimes that are related to the profession or occupation being licensed. So if money's being handled, the language that's usually used in the ordinances are, financial crimes, which can range for everything from false check writing to embezzlement. Here, we do kind of use the shorthand of sexually oriented, and arguably we don't have a complete listing of what statutory violations by code section, state statutory section would qualify for that disqualification. It usually comes up with this area as an act of prostitution conviction.
Yes, Steve?
But I think what he said could have merit. So it'd be felony crimes related to this area of employment or sexual language that's already there.
So if we change the language to say crimes related to the business of massage therapy, that is a vague statement, so then someone has to determine what that means. Sarah?
I'm just curious, I guess I should put that in the comments, but do we know what other cities around us are doing? I know Apple Valley has a lot of rules, just because I've come across this with just trying to help someone get the proper license for a massage therapist and with the insurance and everything else. But do the cities around us have the same kind of language and the same type of 5-year rule or anything?
It's very common for a 5-year rule, and the language that Erica and Michelle put together in here is kind of very typical of what other cities have in their therapeutic massage ordinances. So it is fairly consistent and consequently consistently vague.
Okay.
Tim? I'm sorry, Josh, I apologize.
Yeah, I think it seems to me that we should leave it as is to stay in keeping with what our surrounding communities are doing, and the expectations are kind of a level playing field. It's going to be a gray area of ambiguity no matter which way you try and slice this. And there are many other jobs out there for somebody who may be looking for a second chance. This is one area that is probably a tempting area that maybe we should look elsewhere, for employment. So to me, it seems like however it may be vague, just to keep it as is.
Tim?
So, just so I have this straight in my head right now, so in the current system, or the way that this would be written right now, if we leave it as is, I have a felony, I go and apply for it, I'm gonna get notice that I have a felony, I'm gonna get rejected. I can then have the right to appeal and go to a board and say, hey, by the way, this felony that I got rejected for was for X, Y, and Z reason. So can that board then override it, and I can actually get the license even though I've had a felony? However, we've had the plain language in the code, but I've used the next step to mitigate these circumstances that we're trying to put into the code right now.
Is that accurate? That if someone has a felony, they can go through the appeals process and that board can say, sure.
I'm not sure if it happens, but is it possible?
Yes.
You can appeal anything.
Yep.
Whether it's successful or not is clearly what the code section says, what state law says, and pretty much what the hearing officer is going to say too.
Okay, so then, in effect then, you can appeal it, but the hearing officer is gonna say, well, it says felony, and this is a felony, so, no.
Could go that way.
I would say
Mr.
that
Chair, I
that
think that's
is
correct
true.
unless we have language in there regarding related to the profession or some other language, the existence of a felony of whatever type under that language that your statement relates to would be an absolute bar.
So if we amended the language to say, has been convicted of a felony related to the profession or any sexually oriented crime, et cetera, then it would come down to a hearing officer to determine whether or not this is crossing the line?
That's correct.
Okay.
I have a proposal. Would we want to consider that the city manager may make exceptions to this as that seems adequate? So for instance, I'm thinking about
Mitigating
some
circumstances,
instances, so like somebody streaking through the neighborhood might be considered a sexually oriented crime, but it could be a teenager who just did this on a dare or something like that. So maybe that we can take those cases into consideration when we're denying it, and the city manager can make the final determination on whether or not we should allow it.
Where would you put that in the code?
I remember when we were talking about felonies before, we also gave the city manager some authority to do it. And I think we just take that same language that we used in that previous title to allow the city manager to make the final determination if they see that an exception could be made.
Okay.
Because there are others, I mean, in C, D, E, F, there's a ton of things here that if they happen within the last 5 years, it's supposed to be denied. So it seems reasonable that some appeal or a higher authority or whatever should apply to.
An appeal is always still an option, but I think that if the city manager then did not deny, would not grant an exception, then they could still go to an appeal at any time. I'm just saying that would keep the whole formal appeal process out of it if it was something, like I said,
Minor.
teenager streaking through the neighborhood on a dare kind of situation.
I believe we had a senior streak in 2007.
My
Are we
child,
talking 65 plus? Or,
high school
He
graduation.
got arrested, he ran across the field and got over the fence, and the police were waiting for him when he got there. And one of the problems that we were concerned about, that he could have been charged with the sexual type crime.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's his life.
So a felony is a felony. This language change, if it does move forward, just provides the person who wants to appeal to be appealing to that language, which then, if it's being heard, they're not looking at it as, it just says felony, so off you go. It's got maybe some tighter ambiguity that you can.
I would
don't think
actually
you'll agree with
propose
that.
a solution that's a little more creative and liberal, believe it or not. I would propose that after item L, we say any person barred by the above criteria may make special application for exception override with the city manager prior to applying or discuss their situation, and we could put some verbiage around that to give people the invitation to apply if they maybe have a weird felony that's not related, but doesn't, and it gives the city manager discretion to approve.
Mr. Chair, if I might make a suggestion,
yes.
rather than have it in L, it's probably best to put it, like Michelle said, similar to what we did previously, probably in 315-9, where in paragraph B of that section, we talk about the appeal rights and reapplication and evidence of rehabilitation, maybe to add that as a subparagraph C, rather than in the following section.
That makes much more sense.
We can draft that and bring that back to the task force review.
Okay, yes, sir.
I have just one perspective for people to think about too. In almost 30 years of doing this, I don't recall ever having anybody who applied for a license had a felony. It never came up, just to let you know.
Yeah.
It usually occurs after they're issued the license.
Oh, you were the streak.
Okay, so looking for consensus, do we agree that we'd like to see the city come up with language into, I think, 15-9, probably C, that would allow this type of exception?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anything left on the disqualifications in 1510 or can we go to 1510 I think let's move to 1511.1, license restrictions regarding sanitation, health, and safety. You see that there are several items that have been added. Yes, Michelle?
I'm sorry, I just realized we skipped over something that I wanted to call out for the task force members to consider. And back in 31510-1, in those ineligible things, one of them was K, the spouse. And we actually considered, do we want to keep that in there or not? And maybe you would like to consider that as well.
Okay.
I noticed that and thought perhaps people just want to lie, and so they use someone else's name.
And that has happened.
It has happened.
You know, you shouldn't punish one spouse for the actions of the other, but I don't really know how you get around that. I would think if you had a spouse who just legitimately really thought she should be able to get a license except for her crummy husband, that would be in the
Except
appeal
process.
process or whatever, you know, talk to the city manager thing. Yeah.
Is spouse the wrong word? I mean, certainly many people just cohabitate, are not actually legally
we get a
married,
freebie.
but, what's that?
We get a freebie.
Domestic partners don't have to worry about it.
There are advantages.
There are a few.
Yeah, well, I mean, technically, could we even regulate, and how do we know who's living with whom for how long? I mean, I wouldn't even wanna get into
How-
that business of looking into that.
Since this is, it says the spouse, how would the city even know? Because we're not saying my wife's application doesn't authorize the city to run a background check on me. Cause I'm not the applicant. How would the city know?
Same address?
I think that, what I'm thinking about is that when we talk about not the real party of interest in the business,
Yeah.
that's really what that section also gets to, because if you're not the massage therapist, you shouldn't be the one getting the massage therapist license. But, you know, is it possible that, we were thinking, is it possible that a married couple are both massage therapists, and maybe one of them had a reason to have it revoked, but the other didn't, and now we're punishing the other one? That's kind of where we were looking at it. I kind of felt like we could probably strike K.
Okay.
But that's completely up to the,
I agree with that. I think that is not the real party, an interest of the business, is really the actual, deciding factor. If someone's
Because Jay
actually doing
covers it.
business.
Yeah.
Do we have consensus to strike K?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's talk about Clarence Thomas now.
So just looking at a time check, we will, end in about 7-8 minutes. I don't know if we're gonna get all the way through this. I know there was definitely some discussion about minor from when I was reading through the comments. I think that's probably going to lead us into the next session.
Where does that start?
I haven't seen that yet.
Minors.
There was a question about can minors be massaged without parental
Parental
consent? And I saw that in the feedback comments that we gave. I don't know where that's at here yet. But let's just continue to plow through. 31511, license restrictions. So we see that a number of items have been added.
again, these are things that we found that other cities had in their code, and we were also incorporating them.
Okay.
Oh. K, 315.11.1K mentioned,
Restrictions involving minors.
yeah.
It says no person under the age of 18 should be permitted at any time to be in or on the licensed premises as a customer, guest, or employee unless accompanied by his, her parent, or guardian.
Yeah, I'd like to discuss that a little bit. I honestly think that that's a little too restrictive for several reasons. I mean, you know, a 16-year-old can get an abortion without parental consent and consent to any other sorts of medical services where their parents can't participate. And actually, when you look at legitimate massage, it is a medical type of service, sports injuries. You're also putting a burden on parents. We have a very mobile culture where kids are driving by 16 and they're off on their own. If the parent has made the appointment, potentially they could still be working and the kid could be out of school and taking themselves there. Could be a guardian. I assume that would qualify as a permitting party, but a grandparent. I mean, there are a lot of people, it takes a lot of people to raise kids these days. I think we're hurting parents here, potentially. And I'm not sure that in our culture, a parent should have that much control over a minor's decisions at this point. I think that's actually a little regressive in some ways.
I would like to see language that says 16. I think that seems to be reasonable. Yes, sir?
I think part of this language came out of what they found regards to sex trafficking of minors. So I think that was a restraint that was probably put in place to address that issue. As far as the, you know, a minor 16, you know, up to age 16, if they're a registered patient, perhaps.
I think maybe we do look at some registered patients. I mean, nobody wants sex trafficking to happen in our community. If that's really the concern here, and these are the types of establishments that this tends to happen at historically, I don't have enough data to inform that decision.
Joel, can you comment on that at all? The concern of sex trafficking for persons that are 17 or 16?
Unfortunately, it's 13.
Well, I think, I mean, that obviously is a major concern with false identification. The rest, generally speaking, though, I don't think we'd be prosecuting under this section all that frequently. So to, you know, if that's occurring, there'll be other crimes of a greater nature than an ordinance violation, age limit for the ordinance, that would be the basis of that prosecution. And, you know, I mean, obviously, if there's a child of the employer working as a front clerk, sales clerk, you know, to have the owner parent be present at that facility during that time might be unduly burdensome. So there is some merit to considering revising that downward to 16 years of age, perhaps.
Was your statement that the concern about minors was minors that are working and being sex trafficked, or minors that are going to a massage?
I didn't clarify either on that. I just was pointing out that's probably why the language was put in.
That makes
I mean, there is probably some merit to having further discussion because it is applying the 18-year age standard as customer, guest, or employee and requiring parental presence with that that individual under the age of 18.
And they're emancipated minors too.
And we're not going to finish it tonight, so we can take a look and see if other cities have lightened that particular restriction. We can do that pretty easily with a check of some of the ordinances.
Well, I
But
think
the
that,
concern is valid in my opinion.
okay. Is there, go ahead.
Could the language be left in there with the addition that if a parent wants a minor to receive the services as prescribed, that's kind of against the code, that the business could then, or the massage therapist could then say, by the way, if you're 16 and you're coming here by yourself, we do have this part in the code. I need your parents to sign this off. That waives this portion of the code. And that way, we're still covered, but that the parent is aware, and we do have some kind of a checkpoint that the parent knows that, and I think that's what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's the register.
Yes, I mean, I think the language could be added to say, or with the written consent, and broaden it from accompanied, for instance, with or without an age modification as well.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that the city try to rework this language in view of the discussion tonight and bring it back to us next time.
Okay, so she said the magic motion word. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Okay. All those, sorry, should there be a discussion on it? Okay, all those in favor of referring this to the city, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Can we take 3 extra minutes to finish out the section? Can I have the patience of the committee? I, point J, the same section, windows. The exterior windows of the commercial license permitted must not be 100% opaque. I think that is bad language. I think it's bad language because 99.5% opaque is functionally opaque, while not legally opaque. I think that opaque is an interesting word. I assume that the concern is, so there's not even requirements that businesses even have windows. For example, you go to the Home Depot, the windows on their store is just for their vestibule. You can't actually see into the store at all. So a business doesn't have a requirement to have windows unless there's some other statute that I'm aware of. And I think that there's maybe a perception that if you have a massage therapy place and the windows are covered, that something untoward must be happening there. But certainly, you can't see through the entire building. You know, you can only see into the opening chamber. So saying that the windows must not be covered just means that acts of sexual deviance are just happening beyond the front partition. Likewise, you can have storefronts that literally have the front window dressing. There's a wall there, and there's a 3-foot display section. Well, the window would be not opaque, but I could put a piece of paper right behind it. The window is still not opaque. It is completely translucent, but functionally, it is not working. So I'd like to see this section removed. I don't think it can be functionally enforced. I don't think it serves any public safety benefit.
Do we have any requirements in the city code that any businesses have transparency so that police officers can see in for safety reasons? Is that elsewhere in the building code or anything?
Apparently not, because we have liquor stores, CVS drugstores, a lot of places where I think they intentionally don't want people seeing that there is a single person working in there, and that would be a good time to go get them.
This is the only one that I'm aware of.
So we're basically discriminating against this type of business because of our fears around the behavior that might occur.
But only in the front of the building.
Well, obviously.
Yes.
It's in the back rooms in the back.
Honestly, even if you had a window in there and you're gonna go into a room, let's say in the dentist office, you have, what's the very first thing that you're going to do when you have the service? Is you're going to pull the window shade and you're going to block the window, so it serves no, I don't see the purpose.
Okay, so I'm sensing consensus to strike J, windows, in its entirety.
Agreed.
Okay, any other items through R? And of course, we'll come back to this next time, but if there's not a final point, then we will head towards adjournment.
going now.
Okay, so I think then let's pause here, so if we can make a note that we got right to the point of 315.11.1. And before that, we've covered that, so we won't go over that ground unnecessarily. Of course, if you find things, we can come back. And then there's really only 3 pages left, and I think we've really covered the true meat of it. So I think we will add this as another item, but we shouldn't just delay the session and accept that and just assume we're only gonna cover 3 pages. I think we should move on to the next chapters as well, so we should assign that as homework. So miscellaneous items, the next code review task force meeting will be April 27th, 2022 at 5:30 PM here in the council chambers. Meetings will be typically held on the last Wednesday night of each month in 2022. Our homework is to review Title III, Chapters 20 through 22, which is included in tonight's packet. Task force comments are needed to be submitted by Wednesday, April 13th. If there's no other business, thank you for your time. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you for being with us.